Hello, folks. I'm Josh McGee, and welcome to another episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show, and what actually is the last edition of the Gateway to Soccer Show, at least for a little bit while, right? Next week, I'll be making the move up to Upper Iowa University, become that school's lead play-by-play broadcaster. I'm very excited for this opportunity, but obviously it's a little bittersweet. My duties are probably going to take me away from consistently putting out this show. I don't want to completely, throw it in the bin. Hopefully I'll be able to come back to it someday. I'll get a little bit more into this at the end of the show, but I'm treating this as the last edition for a little while. So as far as the home studio goes, I'm going to go out showcasing some of my favorite things. Over here on this shoulder, one of my favorite U.S. men's national team looks with that navy blue with that white stripe. Of course, over here, one of my latest Chelsea jerseys. This one's got Christian Pulisic on the back. And I'm wearing my Club Atletico St. Louis t-shirt. I can't thank Ricky Garza for everything that he does here in the city of St. Louis for the sport, and also what he's been able to do for my career as well. And of course, flying high, St. Louis City SC. It's going to be very exciting to watch from afar the development of the academy teams and, of course, everything else going on at the club. But despite this being the last episode, I'm still very excited to talk a lot of soccer here today. Of course, we've got both national teams in action once again. A lot of great soccer going on in this country at the club level. And, of course, some interesting St. Louis soccer news to talk about. And I'm very excited for how we're going to wrap up the show this week. Wasn't able to get the big fish guest that I wanted, but I thought we'd go back a little bit in time and check a few things out from some previous episodes that, of course, you may have missed if you jumped into this show a little bit later on, or if you've been with me since day one. It would be a nice way to go back and look over all that we've been able to accomplish. So again, very excited for this last episode for a while. So let's get into it. Of course, we're going to start off with U.S. men's national team and their progress at the Gold Cup. The Gold Cup so far has been an excellent opportunity for many of the U.S. men's national team players to prove their worth and make the case that they belong on a World Cup qualifying roster. Before this tournament, I really thought that list only included maybe a couple of guys. Now at this point, I'm thinking 4 or 5 guys have definitely earned the opportunity to be on a future roster. The U.S. have played in a couple of matches since I last talked, so let's start with that quarterfinal matchup versus Jamaica this past Sunday. Jamaica, they've been a thorn in the side of the U.S. at past Gold Cups before, and they actually started this match out the better team and were able to peg back the U.S. on defense. However, the U.S. would continue to be patient in testing goalkeeper Andre Blake, and in the 83rd minute, substitute Christian Roldan's cross was met by the head of Matthew Hoppe for the game's only goal. U.S. win that match 1-0. They went back to their old, 4-3-3 under head coach Greg Berhalter. And again, the defense able to keep a clean sheet here. I know there were some testy moments early on in that match, but they were able to eventually stabilize. They tested Blake. Again, he's one of the top goalkeepers in MLS, so it was going to take a little while to get it past him, but finally do. Again, Matthew Hoppe has really shown himself this term. Plays obviously for Schalke there in German Bundesliga 2, but he's really come on as of late, and here he gets the only goal of the match. So the U.S., they found a way. They had to push for it. They had to kind of, settle things down early on in that match, but they were able to get it done. They kept a clean sheet, and they were able to advance to the semifinal. Awaiting for them in the semifinal would be Qatar, who's really taken their invite to the Gold Cup and run with it. They had at least scored 2 goals in each one of their matches. The U.S., they remained unchanged from that Jamaica match, and they started pretty much like that match. Qatar really, got on them. They had this very expansive style in terms of, passing the ball, setting up looks. Matt Turner had to come up with a couple of clutch saves early on to keep the match level at 0-0. The drama really picked up in the second half. After Daryl Dike had an attempt saved as he was played into the box, Qatar were awarded a penalty late on in the match after the referee consulted the VAR monitor. It was a really tough call. It seemed maybe a little bit harsh on one, image of the replay. It seemed like James Sands had gotten the ball first. On the other, views of the replay, it seemed though he got more of the man. At the end, referee awards penalty. Hassan Al-Hidos steps up for Qatar, but he eventually skies his attempt over the bar. He'd actually successfully, pulled off a Panenka early on in this tournament. It kind of looked like he was caught between two minds there about possibly doing it again or actually hitting it full time. And in the end, he skies it over the bar, and the match stayed 0-0. Much like the Jamaica game, the U.S. finally broke through late on in the match, this time in the 86th minute, when substitute Nicolas Gioacchini got loose on the left side of the box, was able to slide home a pass to a waiting Gyasi Zardes, who was able to tuck home his attempt from close range. The U.S. will now face their toughest test at this tournament as they will face Mexico in the Gold Cup final on Sunday night. Mexico, they have 8 total Gold Cup titles, while the U.S. currently have 6. So in my opinion, I think at the end of the day, I know the results, they haven't been flashy, they haven't been perfect, but the U.S. men's national team, this iteration of the national team, has made it to the Gold Cup final. I would consider that a success. Mexico, they're going to be playing basically almost their top team here in this final, where we have arguably brought our C team, right? We're just trying to find some other guys, you know, MLS guys, some other guys out there who could potentially make a World Cup qualifying roster. I feel like we've achieved that goal. Like I said, I thought that list was very small coming into this tournament, and we're going to leave it here with a little bit bigger of a pool to pick from in terms of these players for World Cup qualifying, as long as they don't get completely played off the pitch, right? We don't want, you know, in past Gold Cups, Mexico have completely dominated sometimes in these finals. We don't want that type of situation. If the U.S. are able to come up with a competitive match versus Mexico with this iteration of this team, I think of that as a success. Of course, I want to win it. It'd be fantastic to win it with this team, really cap off what has been a good tournament, a showcase of some of these guys that we haven't seen before. But at the end of the day, again, we just want to make sure that we don't get embarrassed by these guys. Obviously, Mexico, they're going to be out for blood because of the CONCACAF Nations League. So the U.S. have got to be ready. They can't have these slow starts like they did versus Jamaica versus Qatar, where they let the other team, you know, get into their own box, let them have some of these chances, and eventually push out. They're going to have to match Mexico's intensity. They're going to have to weather the storm possibly for the first couple, 10, 15 minutes. Then at the end of the day, though, in terms of how they've been playing, the way that we've been playing in terms of formations, I got to think that they're going to put in a good shift here Sunday night and be competitive versus Mexico. Again, hopefully not played off the pitch, but at the end of the day, I think this has been a pretty big success for the U.S. in terms of looking ahead to World Cup qualifying in September and who could potentially be on that roster. Okay, now while the Gold Cup has been happening here in the U.S., over in Japan, we've had two really good soccer tournaments going on there for the Olympics. Let's start off with women's soccer. Of course, we got to start off by talking about the U.S. women's national team. They were able to qualify out of their group, but it wasn't all that pretty. After their embarrassing loss to Sweden, the U.S. responded with a dominating 6-1 win over New Zealand, in which they got goals from 4 different goal scorers and also benefited from 2 own goals by New Zealand. However, they followed that up with a 0-0 draw versus Australia. Alex Morgan had a goal called back by VAR due to being offsides, but other than that, there weren't a lot of other chances in this match, and Australia actually dominated possession, especially early on. I believe they had over 60% possession for the first, long period of there in the first half. So the U.S., 1 win, 1 draw, and 1 loss. It was enough to get them into second place in their group behind Sweden and qualify for them for the next round. But of course, by finishing second, they're going to have to play a tough team, and they drew the Netherlands, which would be a rematch of the 2019 FIFA World Cup final. So before I get into that match itself, again, the U.S., they just didn't look themselves during group play. Obviously, the New Zealand match, they did a little bit better. They were a bit more aggressive. We got some goals from different players, but then they kind of slunk back to what went wrong versus Sweden versus Australia. They weren't as aggressive. They didn't press as much. The passing and link-up play just wasn't there, and they weren't able to create too many chances. Obviously, the difference this time was they were able to keep the clean sheet. That seemed to be the focus of Vlatko Andonovski for this match. But at the end of the day, they just didn't look like the U.S., right? Obviously, the 6 goals helps in terms of their overall goal difference, but it only came in 1 match. They were shut out in their other 2 matches. So that's quite unlike the U.S. women's national team. Obviously, the defense did a little bit better in those 2 last matches besides the Sweden match. But still, this was a different U.S. women's national team than we've been seeing during that 44-match unbeaten run. They tried to do some plug and play, obviously, get some players rested up for the upcoming rounds, just, advance out of this group. But still, they put themselves in a very tough hole, having to go on to play a really tough team in the Netherlands here coming up. But still, they were able to get out of their group. That was the main goal. And they moved on to face the Netherlands in a really big clash here in the quarterfinals. Then came the match versus the Netherlands, which absolutely lived up to the hype. Oh my goodness, there's just so much to get to from this match. It started off in the 18th minute when the Netherlands opened the scoring through Viviane Miedema, who was able to score her 9th goal of the Olympics. The U.S. would answer back just 10 minutes later with a Lynn Williams cross that was eventually headed in by Sam Mewis. Williams would actually get on the score sheet just a couple minutes later with the right-footed shot that put the U.S. up 2-1. In the second half, Miedema would equalize for the Netherlands with a powerful effort for her 10th goal of this tournament. That's an Olympic record. It's amazing what she's been able to do in front of net here for the Netherlands, and she ties up the match here at 2-2. The Dutch actually had a chance to win this match late on when they were awarded a penalty, I believe, in the 81st minute from a foul by Kelly O'Hara, but goalkeeper Alyssa Nair was able to step up and save Leaky Mertens' attempt and send the match into extra time. In extra time, things got even crazier. In the first period, the Netherlands had a goal disallowed by VAR due to offsides. In the second period of extra time, the USA had 2 goals disallowed by offsides by VAR. Just an amazing turn of events. It seemed like, we're going to have a bunch of back and forth action, but at the end of the day, nobody scored in those periods, so we go to a penalty kick shootout. In the shootout, Medema was the first person to shoot for the Dutch, but she had her attempt saved by Nair. The Netherlands would have one more attempt saved, while the U.S. went a perfect 4-for-4, with Megan Rapinoe scoring the winning penalty, as the U.S. were able to defeat the Netherlands and move on to the semifinals with a matchup versus Canada awaiting them. So again, this was just a crazy match. Again, a rematch of the 2019 FIFA World Cup final. The U.S., once again, maybe not at their best, but of course they were going up against one of the best players in the world, one of the best teams in the world, and they found a way to survive. That's really been the theme for both national teams, right, at these different tournaments. Just finding a way to win and finding a way to survive. The U.S., obviously, they could have had more goals if they'd just been, a step or two on sides, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, it's really good to see, this team be put under pressure in a penalty kick shootout. Alyssa Nair stepped up huge. She was the MVP on the day. I know she's taken a lot of criticism over the years from U.S. Women's National Team fans, but here on this day, she was their best player. 4-for-4 in the penalty kick shootout. That's really good to see as well. So again, survive in advance. Awaiting them is their rivals Canada. We've seen a few, close matchups with them over the past couple of years. So this should be a really good semifinal. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about here, who they could potentially meet up in the final would be an interesting and familiar opponent. But again, the U.S. Women's National Team finding a way to be a really quality team and moving on at the Olympics. As far as how the other teams qualified for the quarterfinals, the women's soccer tournament at the Olympics, you had Great Britain take the top spot in Group A by going unbeaten. Then right behind them, you had Canada in second place, and then Japan were able to qualify for being one of the third place teams that got the highest amount of points. Then in Group B, you had Brazil actually tie the Netherlands on points, but goal difference went to the Dutch. Brazil looked really good so far. You had Marta, you had Davinia just doing their thing as always, scoring a ton of goals and able to get Brazil into the next round. Then in Group C, alongside Sweden and the U.S., Australia were able to qualify for the quarterfinals as being the other third place team with the highest amount of points. In the quarterfinals, Canada and Brazil drew 0-0 in regulation time, so they also went to a penalty kick shootout. Despite Christine Sinclair having her penalty kick attempt saved, Canada made the rest of their shots, while Brazil had their last 2 attempts saved to bow out of the Olympics. Elsewhere, despite getting a hat trick from Ellen White, Great Britain lost to Australia in extra time by a score of 4-3. Australia were led by Sam Kerr, who scored twice in this match. And then lastly, Sweden, they continued their dominating run here at the Olympics with an impressive 3-1 win over the host nation, Japan. So of course, that sets up, the U.S. versus Canada and a rematch from a Group C matchup there, Sweden versus Australia. You have to like, obviously, the U.S. and Sweden to potentially match up again in the final. Wouldn't that just be great storytelling for the U.S. to, get embarrassed in their first match at the Olympics by Sweden, only to face them once again in the final, and they come around and actually beat them this time around. That would be so cool. Of course, obviously, the flip side of that would be if Sweden were to win once again versus the U.S., that would be a tough pill to swallow. But again, Australia, they got Sam Kerr. They've also got a couple of other really nice players. They could potentially, upset Sweden and make that final. And then Canada, of course, Christine Sinclair, a familiar opponent of the U.S. They played them close, I believe, the She Believes Cup earlier this year. So that's going to be a tough test for the U.S. as well. But still, an interesting Final Four, a familiar Final Four if you're the U.S. Women's National Team. We'll have to look forward and see who can make it to that gold medal match and win it all at the Olympics. Now let's take a look at the teams who made the quarterfinals of the men's soccer tournament at the Olympics. Starting off with the host nation in Japan, they earned the top spot there in Group A off the backs of a huge 4-0 win over France. That loss knocked France out of the tournament as Mexico finished in second place in that group. Then you move over to Group B. The top team there was South Korea. They earned that spot with big wins over Romania and Honduras. Finishing the second in Group B was New Zealand, who were led by Burnley forward Chris Wood. Then in Group C, it wasn't pretty. Spain had a couple of draws, but they were able to take the top spot there. They've got a ton of talent on that team that actually featured at the Euros. I know Pedri is on that team. You've got Pau Torres at the defense. Then you got Unai Simon, the goalkeeper there as well. So these guys, they got to be tired at this point. But, man, they're showing out for their country, and they got Spain the top spot there in Group C. Finishing in second, surprisingly, was Egypt. The other two teams in that group were Argentina and Australia, but they weren't able to get it done. Egypt avoided dropping, too many points. I think they only lost once in group play. They were able to survive and find a way. Argentina and Australia got a ton of young talent there, but in terms of the results, they just weren't able to get it done. I believe Australia lost their final group stage match. It might have been to Egypt. That's kind of what kept them out. So again, congrats to Egypt on qualifying out of Group C. And then lastly, the reigning champs, no surprise here, Brazil, able to take the top spot there in Group D. Qualifying behind them was the Ivory Coast, who they got a couple of veterans on that team. Again, remember, you can put 3 players who are over the age of 23, I believe, on your roster. I know Frank Kessie is one of those for the Ivory Coast. There's another one who's well known. And of course, they've got the youngster, 19-year-old Amad Diallo from Manchester United on this team as well. So they qualified there over Germany, who maybe they could have brought some of their other talent that maybe featured at the Euros here, but they weren't released by their clubs. Germany crashes out at the group stage at the Olympics. So again, this has been an interesting, type of tournament in terms of who's been able to qualify. Again, that action there in Group C with Egypt qualifying was a little bit of a shocker, but everywhere else seems to be the expectation. France, kind of in the same line. They could have had a ton more talent here at this tournament, but those players weren't released by their clubs. So they crash out. Mexico are actually considered one of the top teams here at the Olympics, so they were able to qualify there, the host nation in Japan. As far as the quarterfinal matchups are concerned, those go down tomorrow early morning. Kudos to you if you're going to wake up to watch these matches live. First one will be Spain versus the Ivory Coast. I like what the Ivory Coast is doing, but I think Spain, one of the top teams left, actually could be considered maybe the second favorite here, so I'd have to go with them. The next matchup, you've got Japan versus New Zealand. Got to give it up to the host nation right now in the way that they've been playing, the talent that they've got there. Then you've got Brazil versus Egypt. I still think Brazil is the favorite here at this tournament, so I got to lean towards them with this matchup. And then lastly, you got South Korea versus Mexico. A little tricky. South Korea have been playing well. They were the top team in their group. But again, like I said, Mexico are considered one of the top teams still left, so I actually think that they're going to pull this one out. But again, still been a very exciting tournament so far. It's been a great showcase of the youth of these national teams because of the age limits for the men's soccer tournament. So it's been an excellent opportunity to showcase what all they've been able to do here and what players they've been able to develop. So again, get up for those matches if you're interested. Of course, check the score lines like everybody else here when they finish up, but still it's going to be very exciting going to the finish here at the Olympics to see who comes away with both women's soccer, gold medal and the men's soccer gold medal. So for my next segment, I actually want to focus on some news that has kind of flown under the radar just a little bit. We've had so much soccer to cover this summer. We've had the Euros, we've had the Gold Cup, we've had Copa America, we've had the Olympics, we've had all the soccer going on here in the US, but there just hasn't been as much time to cover all the news off of the pitch. Well, all of a sudden, as the calendar turns to August next week, we are on the verge of the regular season there for all the clubs across Europe. So I want to focus in a little bit on the transfer market. I want to specifically focus in on 3 of the bigger clubs there in Europe, what they've been able to accomplish and their prospects coming up here for the upcoming season. So I want to start off with Manchester United. They have completed quite the double scoop of players. They've officially completed the signings of Borussia Dortmund winger Jadon Sancho and Real Madrid center back Rafael Varane. Sancho, he's been on quite a run there at Dortmund over the past 3 seasons in the German Bundesliga. He has scored 37 goals and added a whopping 41 assists. And remember, he is just 21 years old. In terms of Varane, his pedigree is just unquestioned. He was a part of 3 La Liga winning Real Madrid teams and 4 Champions League winning teams. So a couple of excellent signings for Manchester United this summer. Ed Woodward leaves, and all of a sudden they're back to recruiting great players. One of my hot takes for this summer already, I think this puts Manchester United over the top. I think they can win the Premier League with this team. You got to think about what they already have first in terms of the players and the form that they've been showing. Think about the Euros in England this summer, the likes of Harry Maguire and Luke Shaw, what they were able to accomplish. They can bring that goodwill into this season for United. In the midfield, as long as they can hold on to Paul Pogba for at least this season, he could probably maybe display a little bit more of what he's been doing for France. For United, they already had tremendous talent with like Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford out wide. They brought back Edison Cavani, who's still going strong at striker. Now you add 2 of the best at their positions. Sancho, he's a great goal scorer, yes, but he's an excellent playmaker. You see those assist totals. He's really going to be able to open things up for United, provide some speed on the outside alongside Rashford. That's going to be a dangerous duo, on the wings for Manchester. And then Varane, putting him next to Maguire, that's 2 big, excellent center backs there at the back, locking things down, who can also contribute on corner kicks as well. So again, these were just kind of the final pieces that United needed. Have been clamoring for them to get a world-class center back. They've finally done so. Now you add Sancho, 21 years old, bright young talent who's going to really open things up on the offense, make things easier for Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford and some of those other players as well. Again, this has got to be very exciting times for United. They got to be chomping at the bit to get back up to the top of the English Premier League. They've seen Manchester City up there for far too long. Yes, City are still going to have all of that talent, and I'm sure they're going to reload here in the coming weeks. But for right now, United, I think, have won the transfer market here for Premier League teams this summer. And yeah, I truly believe this puts them over the top and makes them one of the favorites, if not the favorite, to win the Premier League this season. As far as the club that could be considered a favorite for the Champions League, we now have to look at what PSG have been able to do this summer. They've taken advantage of the free agent market and brought in a trio of big-time players. Those players are former AC Milan goalkeeper and the reigning player of the tournament at UEFA Euro 2020, Gianluigi Donnarumma. They've also brought in Real Madrid center back and 5-time La Liga champion Sergio Ramos, and they've been able to bring in Liverpool midfielder Georginio Wijnaldum. They're also able to complete the transfer of Inter Milan wingback Achraf Hakimi. So again, PSG, we know they like to splash the cash, but over the years, in terms of the money they've committed to players, they've had to find a way to get around financial fair play. And one way to do that would be to take advantage of a loaded free agent market and bring players in on a free transfer. Again, look at the talent that they've acquired here. I mean, Donnarumma, yes, Keylor Navas is a great goalkeeper, but in terms of the summer that he just had, how young he is at, I believe, 22, and what he's eventually going to become, he's going to take over that spot pretty quickly, and he's going to be there for quite a while. Then you get to Sergio Ramos. I mean, what can you say? He's been arguably the best center back in the world for forever. And in terms of what he's been able to win with Real Madrid, all those big matches he's played a part in, again, just his pedigree alone is worth the transfer, but he's still one of the top guys at his position. Then you get to Wijnaldum, a very underrated part of these great Liverpool teams in the past few seasons. He had a great Euros as well, so he can come in here, play one of those 3 spots in the midfield for Mauricio Pochettino and PSG. And then, of course, also bringing in Hakimi, PSG, they're going to be a very aggressive team, so installing him at right back, or maybe they switch to a wing back system and install him there on the right side. But either way, he's great at getting forward, getting balls into the box, and also scoring the occasional goal as well. So, yeah, 4 big names that PSG have been able to brought in. I think, again, this installs them as one of the favorites. They've gotten to those last stages of the Champions League the past 2 seasons. Neymar and Mbappe are still there. As of right now, I know there's been rumors about Mbappe going to Real Madrid. I don't know if that's going to get done before this season, so he's still going to be there as well. This is a loaded team, right? Mauricio Pochettino, I believe his first full season in charge of the club. I think they're going to be able to do great things. They obviously have to chase the League One title after losing out to Lille last season, but also in terms of the Champions League, I think this definitely installs them as one of the favorites. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about Barcelona and the summer that they've had, having successfully signed Lionel Messi to a brand new contract. They wasted no time in going out and getting reinforcements. Former Manchester City striker and fellow Argentinian Sergio Aguero, as well as Dutch winger Memphis Depay, have signed on with the La Liga Giants. Also, highly rated Spanish center back and former Manchester City player Eric Garcia has also made the switch from Manchester to Barcelona. So some interesting moves here. Obviously, getting Messi's Argentinian teammate, and I'm pretty sure good friend in Aguero doesn't hurt. In terms of replacing the production up front, Aguero, I think he's still got a little bit left. I don't know how much he's going to be able to play and if he can stay healthy. But when he's out there, he's still a really good striker. Depay is the big one, right? In terms of the seasons he's had with Lyon the past couple of years, and of course what he did for the Netherlands at the Euros. He's a very bright, engaging winger there on the outside. It could be someone who could potentially replace Antoine Griezmann. I know there's been rumors that they're trying to sell him, or, be a part of a very dangerous trio up top there with Messi and with Griezmann or Aguero. And then Garcia, he's highly rated. He didn't really get a chance at Manchester City, so he could be a guy to potentially replace PK or just, slide in alongside him. But still, these have been some interesting moves for Barcelona. Ronald Koeman, I believe, is still there as manager, so I'm not sure about that and how it's going to work with his system. But the big thing was there was a lot of speculation, going into the summer. Would Messi stay or would he go? He's obviously signed that new contract, and that is good news for Barcelona. So, again, they're going out, getting some players. I don't think they're quite done yet. They need some help still there on defense and maybe pick up one more midfielder. So we'll have to see where they go for those types of players. But still, pretty good start for Barcelona. And yeah, of course, the biggest thing was making sure they keep a hold of Messi. All right, now it's time to talk about some soccer going on here in the U.S. at the club level. We're going to start off with MLS. And before we get to this past weekend's results, we got to talk about a big trade that went down in the league over this past week. And that would be LAFC midfielder and Canadian international Mark-Anthony Kaye being traded to the Colorado Rapids along with LAFC's first-round pick in next year's Super Draft for $1 million in GAM, that would be general allocation money, a 2022 international roster spot, and future incentives. Anthony Kaye has had quite the impressive start to his MLS career. He made 71 starts in 77 appearances for LAFC, scoring a total of 9 goals and adding 18 assists. So this is a pretty big deal. Anthony Kaye, he's going to join the Rapids after he is done with his Gold Cup run there with Canada. But this is still a pretty big deal. He's been a big part of the success that LAFC has had since entering MLS. Again, they were able to poach him from Louisville City FC in the USL Championship. He's been great for them ever since. This is really going to help out the Rapids midfield. They've climbed to, I believe, 4th place there in the Western Conference. They've moved ahead of LAFC, interestingly enough. So this is obviously a big get for them for what they're doing right now. In terms of LAFC, you know, they've got some guys there in the midfield. They've got Atuesa, they've got Latif Blessing. So they're kind of loaded there. So they're kind of predicting, you know, that they don't want to pay Anthony Kaye here coming up. And they want to use that deal and that contract for obviously, you know, other incentives, the general allocation money, the additional roster spot that they could use internationally. So again, they're trying to play the long game here and utilizing the depth that they have there in the midfield to their advantage. So we'll see if it works out for both clubs. We obviously know that they kind of did this similar thing with Walker Zimmerman, and he has moved on to do great things with Nashville SC. So we'll see if this type of deal could pay off this time for LAFC. But still, it's a pretty big deal. Mark-Anthony Kaye has been a great player here over the years for them, and now he's moving on to Colorado. Another story I wanted to talk about, but I wasn't able to get to on last week's show because it happened on a Thursday night. That would be Seattle Sounders FC's 1-0 victory over Austin FC on the road. Seattle actually set a record in this match. They started 5 players 19 years old or younger, the youngest being Obed Vargas at just 15 years old. I believe he's the 3rd youngest player in MLS history to make a start, or at least somewhere, you know, in that top 3. And they were able to get it done. They pulled away with all 3 points. Raul Ruidiaz came up with an incredible goal, and they were able to hold on there for the 1-0 victory. This just goes to show what Seattle have been able to build over the years. They were forced into this situation. They've had a ton of injuries. They've also had a lot of players called up for international duty. So they had to play the young guys, but they were able to pull it off on the road, no less. An incredible accomplishment there. All these guys, they played admirably, did a good job. I mean, again, think about it. 15 years old, you were thrust into a start on the road in MLS and able to pull it off there. Just absolutely tremendous. So yeah, Seattle needed it. They needed the 3 points because they're trying to stay, you know, at the top of the Western Conference. They played the young guys, and they were able to pull it off. So that match actually led into this past weekend slate of matches. So I want to go over some of the results with you all here. Starting off with that big match on ABC last Saturday, Columbus Crew were able to hold on for a 1-0 victory on the road versus Atlanta United FC, who are still trying to figure things out after the sacking of their manager, Gabriel Hines. Then you had Minnesota United FC get a goal from Robin Laud in the 85th minute to beat Portland Timbers 2-1. Then you had FC Dallas absolutely crush LA Galaxy 4-0 behind the youngest player in MLS history to score a hat trick, and that would be Ricardo Pepi. He's been doing great things already in his young career, the 18-year-old there at Dallas. They just signed him to a brand new, long-term contract. There's obviously been some interest from other clubs from Europe. We'll have to see about that situation. But still, he's been doing great things, and here sets a brand new record there for FC Dallas. Then you had the top team in the Eastern Conference, the New England Revolution, get 2 goals from Gustavo Bo as they beat CF Montreal 2-1. Then you had NYC FC crush their expansion buddy in Orlando City SC by a score of 5-0. Very impressive result there for New York. And then lastly, the 2 top teams in the Western Conference went at it, but it was Sporting Kansas City who came away with a very impressive 3-1 win over Seattle on the road. So again, a lot of interesting results there, but of course some top of the table clashes. Sporting KC, again, able to take advantage of Seattle and the lack of depth that they have due to injuries, international call-ups. They're able to get the 3 points and close the gap to, I believe, just 2 points right now at the top of the table. Then, of course, you now had some of those other Eastern Conference clashes. Columbus has been getting better as Atlanta has fallen down in the table. New England's still going strong there up top. And yeah, NYCFC, again, they've had some inconsistent results, but when they're putting in the goals, they're just crushing teams left and right. So they're definitely a team to watch out for there in the middle of the Eastern Conference. Speaking of them, looking ahead to this weekend's slate of matches, it all starts tonight with 3 really good matchups. You've got NYCFC at home versus Columbus, and then you have an ESPN doubleheader featuring Orlando City hosting Atlanta United, two teams that desperately need a W, and then two other teams that also need a win. That would be LA Galaxy hosting Portland Timbers. Then you move into Saturday. Matchup I'm really interested in would be New York Red Bulls hosting New England Revolution. We'll see if New England trip up here on the road versus New York team in terms of the consistency of the results. Hasn't been there, but they're very capable of putting together a good match versus New England. Most of the other top teams in MLS will be facing lesser competition this weekend, but looking ahead to Sunday, you've got a really cool matchup as you've got second place in the Eastern Conference, Nashville SC, traveling to take on Toronto FC. Toronto, they've bounced back maybe just a little bit since switching managers. Of course, they brought Josie Altidore back in. Nashville, again, they've been doing great things, especially on the defensive end. You've got Joe Willis, obviously native St. Louisan, holding it down there in between the pipes. Of course, they've gotten a lot of great goals from a couple of different players there in the midfield. So again, that should be an interesting matchup. So MLS continues to chug along. We've kind of established the top teams in either conference. You've got New England and Nashville in the East. You've got Seattle and Sporting KC in the West. We had that big trade, Colorado acquiring Mark Anthony Kaye. We'll see what that does to their campaign as they sit in the middle of the Western Conference currently. So yeah, you don't want to lose track of Major League Soccer with everything going on. It's a lot of moving parts. You have matches in midweek still as well. So for all we know, in terms of how the table will shake out, things can change very quickly in the blink of an eye over just a weekend of soccer. Okay, now let's talk about the NWSL. Before we get to the on-the-pitch news, we've got to talk about a major coaching development in this league, and that would be the announcement of Orlando Pride manager Mark Skinner resigning to pursue another coaching opportunity. I believe the top assistant on his staff has also resigned. Orlando, they've already gone about and named a replacement in terms of an interim manager, and that would be former University of Florida women's soccer coach Becky Burleigh. So again, this is kind of a strange decision, right? Orlando, they'd been near the top of the NWSL just a few weeks ago. They've slipped up just a little bit because obviously they're missing Alex Morgan, maybe a few other players, but still they've had a solid season so far. But I did some digging in terms of the rumors. It sounds just like Mark Skinner might be in line to replace Casey Stoney at Manchester United, which would be a huge step up, in terms of the international stage. It'd be a tremendous honor. So understandably so that Skinner, if he's in line for this, that he would be interested in it. But still, a little bit of a mix-up here in mid-season for Orlando. We're going to have to make a little bit of adjustment. Obviously, this is a tough time when they're missing one of their best players. But still going forward, going to be interested to see what Burleigh can do in terms of, moving up to the NWSL and helping out with Orlando in this situation. So still, definitely something to keep an eye on here in the next upcoming weeks. Speaking of teams struggling without their best players, that's where I start with these past weekend's results in the NWSL. North Carolina Courage dropped points in a 0-0 draw versus Kansas City. Kansas City still have yet to win a match here in the regular season of the NWSL. So drawing versus the last place team, not a good look for North Carolina. We're missing some players right now, but they've had a severe dip in form. Cascadia rivals OL Reign and Portland Thorns FC each picked up a win versus Orlando and the Houston Dash respectively this past weekend. You had New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC hold on to beat Chicago Red Stars by a score of 2-1. Then you had the Washington Spirit beat Racing Louisville FC by a score of 2-0. So you can pretty much see it right now in the NWSL standings, right? Which teams are going up, like Washington, like New Jersey, New York, and which teams are going down, like North Carolina and like Orlando. That's all about dealing right now in terms of personnel, who's with the Olympics, other teams that have injured players and such, who's doing a better job of dealing with that type of situation. So again, it's interesting going into this weekend, how much things have kind of changed. Of course, you still got like a team like Portland near the top, but you have these other teams coming on just right behind them. As far as this weekend's slate of matches is concerned, starting Saturday, you've got those two clubs who have been struggling, North Carolina and Orlando, going up against one another. You also have OL Reign versus Racing Louisville FC, which should be a fun match. Then we've got a few matches on Sunday, but I'm most interested in watching fourth place Chicago, who've risen up in the standings as well due to them getting more healthy, going up against third place Washington. So exciting times in the NWSL. This has been also a great time because of all those players who have left for the Olympics. For some other players to step into the spotlight, you have someone like an Ashley Hatch for Washington or a Midge Purse for New Jersey and New York, who've been putting in a lot of goals as of late, who get some time to shine with all those players missing. So again, the NWSL season rolls on, even without those players. And yeah, really exciting times in the league. We've had a little bit of turnover in the standings, and that should continue going into this weekend. Now let's get to the USL Championship. I'm going to start off with the big player acquisition by one of its clubs from this past week. And that would be the Charlotte Independents announcing the signing of former Leicester City left back and English Premier League champion Christian Fuchs. Fuchs will join the Independents for the remainder of their season before joining up with Charlotte FC ahead of their inaugural season in MLS next year. So this is a good bit of business by the teams in Charlotte. Obviously, Fuchs is not doing anything right now because Charlotte FC will start up in 2022. So he's going to play for the current club there in Charlotte, which is just an exciting thing for their fans as of right now. It's going to help them out during this season. I don't think he envisioned playing in the USL Championship, but still, he's going to be a quality player. He's going to provide a lot of experience. I don't know in terms of the team setup if Charlotte need a left back, but when you've got someone with the pedigree of Fuchs, you can't say no. So again, it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts to the American system right away. Obviously, he can kind of get his legs under him. He can kind of get some experience before making the move up to the MLS team there in Charlotte. So still, good bit of business. Once again, some synergy working between the USL Championship Club and the MLS club there in Charlotte. And yeah, Fuchs is going to get started on his American career a little bit early. Okay, now let's get to all those results from this past week in the USL Championship. Of course, we'll start off with this past weekend. Last Friday, Pittsburgh Riverhounds SC got a big 3-1 win over New York Red Bulls 2. Of course, it was of note to St. Louis FC fans as former players Russell Cicerone and Albert Dequa scored for Pittsburgh. You also had on that Friday, Colorado Springs Switchbacks FC hold Louisville City FC to a 1-1 draw. Also kind of in the Central Division on Saturday, you had Birmingham Legion FC versus Indy 11, and Birmingham was able to come away with all 3 points on a 91st minute winner by Jonathan Dean. Then you had Rio Grande Valley FC Toros and Austin Bold FC played to a 1-1 draw, while rivals El Paso Locomotive FC and New Mexico United also drew, but by a score of 0-0. Then lastly, out west, you had Phoenix Rising FC hold on for a 1-0 win versus the San Diego Loyal. Former St. Louis FC player James Musa scored in just the 9th minute. So some big results there from this past weekend in the USL Championship. You've got Birmingham staying near the top of the Central Division thanks to that late minute winner. Then you've got some movement between the Texas teams there and some of the other teams down south. And of course, you also have Phoenix holding on to their top spot in their division as well. Then, of course, you move into midweek. In terms of the results there, it was El Paso getting the full 3 points this time in a 2-1 win versus San Antonio FC, which actually leaped them ahead of Rio Grande Valley into first place in their division. Then you had a couple of Central Division matchups. You had Atlanta United 2 beat FC Tulsa by a score of 2-1. And then former St. Louis FC striker Kyle Gregg scored what proved to be the game winner in Louisville's 2-1 win over Sporting Kansas City 2. Those results set up what is going to be a very exciting weekend in the USL Championship. In that Eastern Division, you have second place Pittsburgh hosting third place Hartford Athletic. There should be a lot of goals in that match. Then in the Central Division, you've got two pretty important matchups. You've got Birmingham hosting Atlanta, and then you've got Louisville hosting OKC Energy FC. Louisville have kind of taken a hold of that top spot in that division, but Birmingham are right on their heels, so it's important for either team to pick up the full 3 points this weekend. And then you kind of got a heavyweight clash. They're in separate divisions, but still they're the top teams there. You've got first place Phoenix going up against second place Rio Grande Valley. So again, very quality matchup there, and it's important still to pick up those 3 points, even though it's not a division opponent. You don't want to be losing at this stage of the regular season. So those are the more high-profile matchups this weekend. A lot of great action across the U.S. here in the USL Championship. But yeah, we've seen a couple teams switch places near the tops of their divisions across this league. So again, a lot of movement going forward. We'll have to see how this weekend's results shape up, how the midweek results go, of course, as well as we move further along into the season. Okay, now let's talk some St. Louis soccer news. There's not too much to report for this week, but I do have a couple of news stories. I want to start off by talking about something that didn't make it into last week's episode, and that would be, I think, members of the St. Louis City SC front office and members of the Fan Experience Council were able to take in a match at Sporting KC when they hosted the San Jose Earthquakes. They were there kind of to observe the game day experience for fans, ask questions of personnel, what worked, what didn't work, and kind of, take in some data research and bring it back here to St. Louis. This is something I've talked about with, several other people here on this show or just elsewhere in general. We want the experience, at the stadium with the club to be authentically St. Louis, but there are plenty of success stories in MLS clubs who are doing it the right way and who we can learn from, and this is just a part of the process. So it's really cool. Obviously, Sporting KC, they're going to be a rival in MLS when we eventually join up. It was nice of them to host some of our fans and some members of the front office so we could kind of learn from them and see what works, because really, truly, they've got a great setup over there. So again, great developments on that front with St. Louis City SC. In terms of the academy teams and the MLS Next, stuff going on, haven't seen too many updates there as well. but I'm sure things will pick up here in the next few weeks. For my next news story, usually I don't talk about USL League One on the show because there's so much soccer to get to, and I don't want this show to be, hour and a half, 2 hours, make it way too long. But I did think this was kind of cool from this past week. Former St. Louis Biliken Robert Christo was named USL League One Player of the Week for his 2 goals he scored in North Carolina FC's 4-0 win versus the Richmond Kickers, including a goal from nearly half field. If you haven't looked it up, I definitely encourage you to do so. It made the rounds, kind of went viral on Twitter. So it was a really cool moment for Christo. And of course, scoring another, coming up with the win for North Carolina and being named Player of the Week. That's pretty impressive, slate of accomplishments. So congrats to him for having a pretty good season overall, but having a great week, obviously, this past week for North Carolina FC. Yeah, hoping and wishing for success for him going forward. And lastly, I want to give some huge props to Chattanooga FC. Last Saturday, they became back-to-back NISA Independent Cup Southeastern Region champions after a huge 5-0 win versus Soda City FC. By the way, great name for a club. There are, of course, a lot of St. Louis connections on Chattanooga. You've got former St. Louis FC player Richard Dixon, as well as St. Louis area natives Alec Reddington and Brian Beeman on the team. Also, former St. Louis FC vice president and general manager Jeremy Allenbaugh is still the club's managing director. So congrats to all of those guys, on repeating as Independent Cup, Southeastern Region champions. Had a great season here in the summer. Of course, the action doesn't stop for them. They'll be preparing for their fall season here in just a couple of weeks, but still, they've been doing great things over there at that club. Jeremy done an excellent job of bringing in players from all different parts of the country in order to build a successful team over there. So congrats to those guys, continuing to make St. Louis proud, and looking forward to what they do here in the fall. So to wrap up this week's episode, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I think what I'm most proud of about this show has to be the interviews, right? I'm not a big wig personality. I don't have my own TV or radio show. I'm not a big name just quite yet. So I've been amazed and quite frankly shocked at the amount of people who've taken time out of their busy schedules to talk with me on this show. I've talked to players, I've talked to coaches, I've talked to journalists, and I've talked to fans, most of whom have been doing great things here in St. Louis. It's been an absolute joy to meet people and to talk soccer with them. So I thought I'd compile everything together into one interview medley. So this is going to be the best of the interviews that I've had on this show. A lot of the times, obviously, my interviews have had to deal with current events. So they're more so, in time with what was going on during that week. But still, I found a lot of questions and answers that ring true even today and also ring true going forward. So I've compiled some of the best into this little, interview medley to wrap up this week's episode. So if you've been with me since the beginning, this will be a great, travel back in time. And if you came up to this show, midway or have just now got into it, this will be a cool way of seeing what I've been able to accomplish so far. So here we go, the best of the Gateway to Soccer show. Because a couple of weeks or a week ago, you wrote a piece for stlouisfc.com detailing your experiences with racial injustice and your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement and all that's been going on with our country. I just want to ask you, I think we've seen posts from players and all these other different things that teams around the country have been doing, but you went a little bit of an extra mile here to get the word out a little bit more. You can talk to me a little bit about what compelled you to reach out in this forum.
As of right now, I feel like there's only certain things that you can do to help, to let people know what you're going through. And for me, going through it on a daily basis, whether it's on the pitch or whether it's just in life, I think it was important for me to let people know and see my perspective and where I'm coming from, because not a lot of people get to see a different perspective. And obviously you see all these posts and media stuff from people, but you never get to see from somebody personal to you. So I kind of try to get my message out there and let the community know kind of what I see and what I go through, and really try to get the word out there, because this racial injustice is going to continue. And if you're not educated or having these tough conversations, it's always going to continue, and we're never going to have change or move forward. So I just felt as if we need to have these hard conversations. We do need to have these discussions on what's going on. So, yeah.
So it's important because, again, the status and what you guys have been able to accomplish with the Lions, it's really important to have that foundation there. You guys are the oldest semi-pro team in the region. you've had a hand in providing a path for development for players to the professional ranks. You also have a unique relationship with Celtic Football Club and what you've been able to do with them as partners. I wanted to ask, during your time as the owner of the Lions, what are you most proud of and what you've been able to develop with this club from the ground up?
Well, I think probably the thing I'm most proud of is helping players. The one of the reasons I get involved in coaching at the youth level was if I was going to do something, I want to make an impact in a player's career. And even if it's just, the smallest part that I can make, at least I've made an impact with players. And I think that's probably the biggest thing when I started the St. Louis Lions. One of my goals was that if we could help one player per year at least move on to a professional level, then we have been successful in the program. If I fast forward, 15 years, we're probably anywhere from 50 to 70 players that have passed through our ranks that have moved on to some level of professional. And, a few years ago, I did a little bit of, thinking about, we went through another tough time, probably about 6-7 years ago, with regards to, the upcoming season, funding things. And I kept thinking, how are we going to make this all work? And some of the things that drove me forward was the fact that so many of my former players would contact me and help support me by sending players, giving me contacts to whether it be sponsorship, the level of, contact and coaches. And a lot of these former players have moved on to coaching at the college level. And of course, some of them at the youth level. And it's phenomenal, the impact. And I'm not saying that that's my impact, but it's great to see former players, going back into the game and either getting a living from it or putting back into the game. That's probably the most satisfaction that I get. When I go to the coaches convention, I can't tell you the number of former players that I just run into, and that they're there because they're coaching. They're coaches, and like I say, some of them some at professional level, and some are a lot in the college level. So that's probably the most satisfaction that I get as a coach, knowing that you've helped, even if it's just getting a player one step in the right direction, that you've been a part of that.
So I actually want to expand a little bit about that, one of those last parts about what it means to be at SLU for you, because it is Women's History Month. And of course, St. Louis had a proud tradition of producing and supporting women's soccer here. Of course, just recently, we now have a female majority ownership group of the new MLS team coming up in a couple of years. I just want to ask, because eventually you found your way here to SLU for your coaching career and have had tremendous success. So I want to ask about, what does it mean to you to be a part of this city's soccer culture?
Oh, it's an unbelievable culture. And it's been that way decades and centuries. We're a soccer city. And I think that's something just that is continuing to unfold and evolve with the MLS team, with the ownership group, but also just the depth and quality of the players the city produces year in and year out to play, first quality club soccer and high school soccer, and then the amount of high-level Division I players that come out of this city every year is incredible for its size. And then in the pros, and obviously representing our country, has been a tremendous line of St. Louis women. And I think one thing we very much pride ourselves in, a piece of what I love about St. Louis and St. Louis University is the love for the game, and our program. I mean, we were 16th in the country in 2019 in attendance, and that's out of 331 Division I programs. And so I just love being in a soccer city because it's also the game I love. And so I think it's something that our women are wrapped up and supported by this community, and it's just going to grow, I think, with the addition of MLS coming in the next couple of years.
Tyler, I want to transition here to St. Louis FC. Obviously, that's how we got to know each other. over the past couple of years. And it's not really, normal sometimes to be able to enter into a sports team and kind of develop alongside them, right? You started out as an intern there, worked your way up to the communications manager position, and kind of developed alongside the club. And I mean, obviously the on-the-field product is a big thing, but over the years, in terms of the growth of that club, I just want to ask, either from your standpoint or from the club standpoint, what you were a part of, what were you most proud of in terms of growth and development with St. Louis FC?
Yeah, that's a good question. For my personal development, I think just like in my career, but also just like as a person, I think sports is so, you can't plan for everything, right? Like both of the results on the field, but just stuff off the field. There's a changing environment all around you, and you're in a very public eye, whether that be within your market or 5,000 people within the stadium, and you have to react to something. So I think for me, one of the biggest lessons I learned was just not reacting emotionally. It's working to solve the problem, or working together to figure out, okay, when I was there, we went through 2 floods, right? 2 major floods, and then kind of a minor flood where we had to move that US Open Cup game to Lindenwood. So just being able to pivot and not panic, I think was probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned, like personal growth. And then within the club, I mean, like I said, when we joined the league, 24 clubs that were in the league, and just accelerated the growth. And I think you could just tell from the attendance that was coming to the soccer park. It's like we really made an impact within our community for the 6 seasons that we're there. And I'm really proud of that.
But Lewis, I also want to ask your perspective, because you're a fan of a non-6 club in the EPL. And I also think as a player, you offer good perspective. And of course, being from England, you offer great perspective. In terms of, we didn't get to talk about this obviously because this is recently developed, but the attempt to form a European Super League by some of the bigger clubs, most of which were from the English Premier League. I want to get your thoughts on that a little bit in terms of the perspective of what those clubs were doing versus what it would have as an impact to all the other clubs, not just in the English Premier League, but all the clubs in England, really, right?
Yeah, no, massively. It was a bit of a disgrace, really, that that those clubs would kind of put that together and try to make it happen. And I think, especially with how last year had been, there's been so many clubs in the lower leagues of England that have struggled financially, and have had to furlough staff, and players have struggled to find jobs and stuff like that. And then you have the 6 richest teams try and figure out how they can make billions more money, rather than finding ways to help all the other teams in England. I think it was kind of extremely bad timing, and even the concept of it, I really don't like. The whole thing, the whole history of English football has kind of been based on how the competition's fair. You see the FA Cup, you see teams getting promoted, teams like Bournemouth that get into the Premier League and get to play against all the teams that are extremely wealthy. I think that's what makes English football so special. It's so unpredictable, and you can't what they kind of tried to put forward really kind of took that away. And it was pretty disappointing to see that happen. And I think it really kind of goes against all that the English football has kind of been about, really. So it's disappointing, and I was glad to see the reaction of all the fans, to be honest, and the feedback that happened pretty much straight away. And I'm glad it looks like it's not gonna come to fruition in the end. So it's good to see, really.
Yeah, it was interesting looking in terms of what has happened in your career. You come into you were drafted into the NWSL. You've now played for 4 clubs, but in the first year of each of those stops, you were able to have immediate success. You scored multiple goals in each of your first seasons with your new clubs. I wanted to ask a little bit about, because it's always a difficult thing adjusting to a new team. I wanted to know if there was anything you would attribute to that type of success when you joined up with the new team, having a good season right away.
I think I learned early on, my dad's a football coach for over 33 years and, basketball referee, and some of the club coaches I've had, Vladko obviously coached me many years of my career. And, one of the things other than being coachable was to be adaptable. And I think that's just been such a unique thing for me going into each season. It's hard to make friends and, build chemistry again and again when you're thrown into different environments. But I've always been somebody that loves a challenge. And I think that's just become one of my attributes, is to be able to adapt, to be able to be coachable, to learn fast, and to also be a student of the game. And sometimes you get complacent when you've been in a club for so long. So, I've loved that part of my journey, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
All right, Kyle, I'll get you out of here on this question. Usually I like to end it asking the players if they have any of the message to the fans, because, again, this whole season has been played pretty much without those guys. And now with the added circumstances of this being potentially you guys' final game, I'm going to assume there will be some type of message or something the fans will get across to you guys. But you've made a lot of fans proud and over the years, and not just, again, as players, but as people. But on the flip side of that, if your interactions with the fans, and obviously with athletes, they play for several teams over time, and every fan base has treated them pretty good. But what makes St. Louis FC, the fans, special to you?
Yeah, they're awesome people. Obviously, during games, home or away, they've traveled, to Kansas City and had more fans than Kansas City. They've traveled, and we've heard them, been able to hear them at, big fan bases like Louisville and Indy when they've been able to go. And it's been awesome. Yeah, the fans at home obviously are cheering and drumming, and they never cease to quit pushing us on. But I think the coolest thing about these fans is that they're awesome people as well. They're not just fans on the weekend and then nobody on during the week. They're people who actually care about people, and they care about the community. And you can see that with the amount of fundraisers that they've been doing to help out people that can't eat. And that's just something that's really, really special. And I don't think we've ever really been to a place where the Luligan ladies have reached out to my wife and tried to make her feel welcome. And they go out of their way to make sure that she's doing well, and that everything's going all right if she needs help with anything at the games or anything like that. And yeah, they're more than fans. Is how I would describe them.
So let's talk a little bit about your role with the club, because obviously you wear a lot of hats, right? President, club director, coach. It's a lot. And in terms of starting out, probably in the beginning, it was a lot to process and a lot to figure out. But over the years, you've been able to grow this academy. You've been able to bring in a ton of outside help that's been really impressive. Obviously, former U.S. women's national team player Lori Kolupny being able to help out is a huge get. Talk to me a little bit about the growth of Fire and Ice. Is it anything that you expected or surprised by its success, or is this kind of what you were hoping for?
Well, I honestly didn't know. I didn't have big plans to form the academy. It was basically just provide an environment for women to play while they're in college, when they're out of college, because there were no options when I first started that team. So that's what it became about. And then it became, people were like, oh, you should form a club. And originally I was like, I don't want to go that route. That's so much more work and so much more headache to deal with. And then I just said, okay, you know what, I'll just try it. And if it works, it works. If it fails, it doesn't. But, you can't ever say that, you weren't successful in something unless you tried. So I'm trying to form something. And so far we've had a good number of high school girls that have come out because they're interested in us helping with the college process. So it's been good so far. And yeah, I'm grateful that it's worked out.
With all those interactions, and of course, you go back all over the place, on-field results, off-the-field accomplishments, again, just any little fan interactions. So what are some of your favorite moments from your career? I'd ask you specifically what your favorite goal would be, but I think I have an idea in mind of what that might be, but you can give a different answer too. But interactions with fans, maybe even funny stories that people don't know about, like a halftime speech from a coach or player that really got you guys going and spurred you on to victory. Just some things that you'd like to share about your time with the club.
Yeah. Man, it's been
I don't want to keep you here all day, though. I know hours of those.
I love talking about it. And I've not been asked this, so I really appreciate the question and the thought behind it. I still remember where I was when I talked to Jeremy when I signed my very first contract. I remember the first jersey reveal at Union Station. seeing those fans for the first time. You know, in college we had a pretty good following, pretty good fan base, but it's a lot of, you know, college kids that don't know soccer. They're just there to hang out, and being around a fan base that really knows and loves the game was huge. I'll never forget going to Sporting in the Open Cup. That was a really cool moment for me professionally, lining up against the Matt Beasler, the Graham Zusis, the Dom Dwyers. I remember walking out from that game trying to be very, very serious and focused and whatever else. And the cannons went off and we started walking out and the fans were screaming about how we suck and whatever. And I was like, man, this is awesome. And then on top of that, just like we had like 300 something Hooligans there that you could legit hear over the Sporting fans. And I thought that was incredible. That was just so cool. And then moving forward, yeah, I mean, Cincy was an incredible moment. That was really cool. Just the timing of it, almost the last kick of the game, and the elation from everyone in the stands was incredible. So that will probably be one of my favorite moments for sure. I'm trying to think of a funny moment or a memorable time. I feel like Patrick Doody would have to be involved in one of those funny moments. The guy is a clown. I love him.
What I was going to say is that you've been a part of a lot of firsts for the club, I would say, over the years. Just even think about the last few years, honestly. Victories over MLS opponents for the first time, longest winning streak in the club's history last season as well. Just this season alone, first road victory versus Louisville. In those types of moments, maybe it's tough to appreciate what you guys are doing at the time, but once you get off the field, I'm sure those were some of those best memories when you realize you've accomplished something that nobody else at the club has done before.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Something else that just came to me about that Cincinnati goal that probably not a lot of people know. As we were running up for that goal, and this has happened to some of my teammates before too, but you get this weird premonition sometimes, like that something amazing is about to happen. And for me, I felt like the Lord was telling me that I was going to score in that moment. And I looked at Kadeem as we were walking up and I said, I'm going to end it right here. Watch this. And then it happened. And I remember after just looking at Kadeem and we were both just like amazed, like, you called it, you knew it. So that was pretty cool, and something that I don't think a lot of people would know is just calling your shot before you do it.
So something obviously you guys have been learning about over the past few years would be in terms of support of the club, right? It's not just about the soccer aspect of it on the pitch. It's about promoting the Lions and growing those relationships, inside the game. I think St. Louis, it's a great place, and it does a great job of supporting local soccer. You guys have been able to build relationships over the years with fans outside of families and friends of players. Talk to me a little bit about how you've been able to do that, how you've been able to connect with those fans, and how can you continue to build upon it during these times?
Yeah, I think it's word of mouth. I think it's word of mouth, from the players basically selling the product, right? I mean, if we can think that we're doing it the right way, and if families and players can come through and enjoy their time, essentially they talk about the product, they talk about the club. Tony's had the youth club since 1994, and so he's touched a lot of families' lives. And, what we're seeing now is a lot of the players that are coming through, their parents or relatives have come through and played, in the club in some fashion as well, and now with the men's team, 15 years on the men's side, in the USL, we're seeing many players who may not, they may not all go on and advance in the game, but what we're seeing now is they're getting into coaching, and you run on to them on the pitch, and they're coaching. And so I think a lot of it is just doing what you do because you think it's right, believing in what you're doing, not necessarily taking anybody else's way for doing things, and then allowing it to, again, sell itself. And I'm very proud to be a part of it.
I actually want to kind of ask you to expand upon that just a little bit, because I know that there are athletes at varying levels of not just soccer, of course, but all sports who have had to go through, long recovery processes. And obviously during this pandemic, you're having to deal with a bunch of different things. Are there any other additional lessons that you learned through this recovery, or just anything that was reaffirmed during this process that you would like to pass on to other athletes going through a similar situation?
Yeah, I think for me, like, it was always like, it's your journey. Like, you have to take in charge of it. Like, don't like rush into things. Don't like let people like rush you to doing stuff. Like, I felt like, I wasn't a part of the team and like going to trainings as much just because mentally I wasn't ready. And that was okay. Like, I think athletes think that they need to be there if they're not playing, or just to be there. And if you're not there mentally and you're just like not helping the team in any way, like, I don't think it's a way to put yourself in that situation. I mean, other than that, I feel like I've learned so much about my body, and I think if you're not feeling right, like, don't do it. Like, listen to your body, because you're the only one that knows how it feels. But yeah, and just taking your time, being patient. Being patient is probably the key word for me, because I'm always like, can I do this? Can I do that? Like, oh, you told me I could do this, and then I do it too much, like, so just be patient, like, the time will come.
Well, the reason for obviously a lot of people reaching out is because you were with the club for basically its entirety. You were there from the beginning, and you helped grow it into something that became quite prominent. When you look back on your tenure and those original first couple of years with the club to where you got it to in your final year with the unprecedented Open Cup success, with the team setting a record with 5 straight wins and some of the off-the-field accomplishments that you were able to help build, I want to ask that, did it meet your expectations, or did your tenure and what you were able to accomplish exceed your expectations of what you hoped to do in such a short time frame?
Yeah, I think it was great. I mean, it was a great time in terms of expectations and such. I try to put high expectations, on myself and those that I work with. And I think really to scale back, we have to go back. And so here you are in 2014, you got Patrick Berry, president, but hadn't been in professional sports for quite a while since his time indoors with, the ambush and steamers and stuff. You have a first-time GM who, while may have some experience at some high levels of play as a coach and such, was new. A new coach, with Dale Shilley at the professional level. So, we were, maybe a little naive, a little green, however you want to say it, those first couple of years. But once we got things sorted out, you're now seeing it. In terms of the things that you mentioned last year with Ant, bringing Ant in as a head coach changed things, and the culture that he was able to establish in that locker room, the way that they got into the playoffs in 2018. Last year, obviously not making the playoffs a disappointment, but that Open Cup run, I don't know that you'd trade that for anything. I really think it kindled some spirit and really got some things going again in different parts of the city that maybe hadn't been following St. Louis FC. I think the other thing that you would point to is the academy, and what combining, those two St. Louis Gallagher academies into one under the St. Louis FC umbrella really took off. And if you look at, the Jack Mayers and the Aiden Stanleys and the guys and everything that was able to accomplish with them and the staff that was put together, you look back with some fond memories. There's a ton of disappointment too, but I think when we got into USL, we had certain expectations and we thought that we were going to be able to manage them. And then quickly the game changed when you bring in, the group in Louisville and everything that they've done, and you bring over, high spending teams from the NASL, Indy, Tampa, Ottawa at the time. The stakes raised, and maybe we weren't ready for them, but credit to Jim and Tom and the leadership is they allowed us to make those changes and to do those things to get the club to be competitive. And then in the end, the club's been very competitive. So overall, a lot of success and a lot of fun.
So there you have it, the best of the Gateway to Soccer show. And that's going to do it for this episode. What's going to be the final episode for quite a while. Thank you for tuning in as always. Like I said a couple weeks ago, this show was born out of a bad situation. I still had an itch to talk soccer, but I had nowhere to do it. That would be my advice going forward, right? No matter what hand you were dealt with, always try to make the best of a bad situation. Get creative in that process, and you never know what might turn out. I know I'm not doing hundreds and hundreds of views every week, but in terms of the response to this show, it's been better than I ever could have possibly imagined. So I thank you all for your support. whether you only clicked on a couple of episodes or if you watched every single one of the 36 episodes I put out. Thank you so much for your interest, and continue to have that interest in soccer, not just here in St. Louis, but around the world. I got to give a couple shout outs to some people who've been on the show who also have great shows covering the beautiful game here in St. Louis, and who are going to be great resources going forward if you don't follow them already. Phil Grooms was a multi-time guest on the show. Phil does great work for the USL show and for Flyover Footy. Make sure you're following him and his work for both shows. Then you've got Santiago Beltran, who was also a multi-time guest. Santiago does great work for Leader Sports Media, covering the beautiful game here in St. Louis. Has been doing great work for the past couple of years. Then, of course, you got Mr. Soccer himself, Bill McDermott. Bill, you can pretty much find him on any, outlet, being an ambassador for the game here in St. Louis. Bill's been a great mentor for me and my career, and going forward, I know he's going to be doing great things here for St. Louis. Then you got Matt Bird, who joined me on one of my episodes. Matt does color commentary for the St. Louis Ambush, but he's also one of the main hosts for the This Is Silly podcast, who will be one of the main sources for fans, for St. Louis City SC fans going forward. Then, of course, I've received a lot of support from some of the other shows here in St. Louis. You've got the Lou Boys SC podcast, which is another good source that covers a variety of different soccer topics, especially with U.S. men's and women's national teams, soccer here in St. Louis, and other different soccer topics. Then, of course, you've got the recently new Show Up, Make Noise podcast, from the Luligan Network, who have been doing great things, kind of explaining the culture and how they do things in terms of, the drum line, some of the other ways in terms of fan interaction and what they do in the supporter group section. And going forward, of course, when St. Louis City SC gets rolling, they're going to be another great resource as well. Sorry if I forgot to mention someone or another show, of course, that has shown some support over this past year. But again, it's just a great variety and a great network of people, covering the beautiful game in St. Louis, who are a part of different aspects of that game. And again, going forward, there's just going to be a tremendous amount of resources and, material that people are going to be able to, be like a sponge, soak it all up, soak it all in. You're going to enjoy different parts of everybody's shows. Make sure you're supporting each one another. And again, we all have the same goal. We all love soccer. We all love St. Louis. And going forward, that's what we should be supporting. This has been a fun ride, but I'm not shutting things down yet. I'm just taking a step off for a little while. The plan is going forward, I'm still going to occasionally call in to Atletico TV, but I know that show is in good hands with Ricky Garza, with Ashley, and with the Loco Network STL crew. As far as this YouTube channel is concerned, don't look away from it. You never know when I may find the time to give my thoughts on what's going on in soccer, or when I may be able to scratch together an interview. And who knows, maybe I won't be the only St. Louis to Upper Iowa connection. You can still follow me on Twitter at JCMBrave10, although I will warn you, in a couple of weeks, my Twitter handle is going to receive an upgrade, so be on the lookout for that. But bottom line, guys, thank you all once again for the support, for taking an interest in what I do, and of course, taking an interest in all that is going on in the beautiful game, and of course, here in St. Louis. Continue to show that support to other shows, to other people, because we all want the same thing. We all want to grow the game here in St. Louis and, of course, around this country. So again, this has been fun. I appreciate all the support. Hopefully all will stick with me, watch me from afar. And yeah, while I may be all the way up in Fayette, Iowa, I will always be STL Maine. So again, thank you all for watching. I will be back someday. And yeah, I guess I'm the last one out, so I'll turn out the lights.